My friend's mom said I was like family. Yet that night, she held my gaze like a stranger she couldn't look away from. The house had gone quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Plates sat stacked on the counter, the smell of baked chicken still faint in the air. I'd offered to stay and help clean up, mostly out of habit, partly because I didn't want to leave yet. Mrs. Langford, Clara, as she'd told me to call her once, stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, her hair loose in a way I hadn't seen before. She was humming softly, off-key, a tune that stopped every time she realized she was doing it. I handed her another plate to rinse. She smiled without looking at me. "You don't have to stay, you know," she said. Her voice was even, tired, but the kind that still filled a room. "I don't mind," I said. "It's quieter now." She gave a small laugh, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. Too quiet, maybe. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. I tried not to notice the way her hand brushed mine when she reached for the towel. It wasn't deliberate, at least it didn't feel that way, but the moment stretched longer than it should have. Outside, wind pressed against the windows. A loose branch tapped the glass like it wanted to. "Your friend left his jacket here," she said, nodding toward the chair by the door. "Yeah," I replied. "He always does. Maybe that's his way of coming back." She smiled at that, then stopped, her expression softening into something unreadable. "You boys don't realize how fast you grow out of places," she said. "You leave little things behind, thinking they'll wait for you." I didn't know what to say, so I dried another plate. The towel in my hands was damp, heavy. When I looked up again, she was watching me, not directly, but through the reflection in the dark window above the sink. Our eyes met in the glass, distant but clear, like two people looking into the same thought from opposite sides. Something about it made the air feel thinner. I swallowed and looked down, pretending to rearrange the silverware. She turned off the water. Silence settled in, heavier than before. Then she said, "You've changed since last summer. Is that good or bad?" I asked. She hesitated, wiping her hands slowly on the towel. "Just different." The word lingered. She didn't explain it, and I didn't ask. I took the last plate, stacked it on the counter, and reached for my coat. But before I could leave, she spoke again, quiet, uncertain. "Drive safe, okay?" I nodded, though neither of us moved right away. The wind picked up again, rattling the window. For a second, I thought she might say something else. She didn't. But as I turned toward the door, I could feel her watching, not as a friend's mother, not as family, but as someone who suddenly realized she'd been lonely for a very long time. And somehow, I couldn't forget the way her reflection had looked in that window. The next morning, I told myself it had been nothing. Just a look, caught in bad lighting. A trick of reflection. Still, I found an excuse to stop by the community center that afternoon. Mrs. Lang, Clara, was there early, setting up for her art class. Rows of blank canvases leaned against the wall, and the smell of paint thinner hung in the air. She glanced up when I walked in. "You're early," she said, voice neutral, like she hadn't been in the same kitchen with me less than 12 hours ago. "Yeah, I figured I'd fix that shelf before the kids come in." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Good idea. It's been wobbling all week." I climbed the short stepladder, pretending to focus on screws that didn't really need tightening. I could feel her moving behind me. Soft steps, the rustle of brushes, the sound of her sigh when she thought no one was listening. When I came down, she was staring at one of her unfinished canvases, something abstract, mostly gray, with one sharp streak of red across the middle. "It's not done," she said, catching my eye. "I like it that way," I said. "It looks honest." That made her laugh, quiet and surprised. "Honest," she repeated. "That's generous." We stood there, looking at the painting like it could explain something neither of us knew how to. "You know," she said after a moment, "your friend used to help me clean brushes. He'd talk nonstop about college, plans, the next thing. You're quieter." "I just don't know what the next thing is," I said. That made her turn. For a moment, the teacher in her softened, replaced by something more human. "You've got time," she said. "More than you think." Her tone should have been comforting. It wasn't. It made the air between us feel smaller somehow. She reached for the jar of brushes near me. Our fingers brushed, barely, but it felt too deliberate to be an accident. Her hand stilled for half a second longer than it should have, and when she pulled away, she muttered, "Sorry," without meeting my eyes. "It's okay," I said too quickly. We both looked away. The room suddenly felt too quiet again, like the walls were listening. I shouldn't keep you, she said finally, stepping back. You've got work, right? Not really. She paused at that. A small pause, but one that said too much. Then she smiled, politely, and practiced. Then don't let this place trap you like it does me. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Maybe it's not the place. She froze, just for a beat, then turned back to her painting. You shouldn't stay too long, she said softly. I nodded, but didn't move. My hand still rested on the ladder, the smell of turpentine sharp in the air. She dipped her brush into gray paint, her wrist trembling slightly before she steadied it. The sound of the bristles against canvas filled the silence, slow, deliberate strokes that somehow felt like avoidance. When she finally spoke again, her voice was low, distant. Your friend's mother shouldn't be the one keeping you company on a Tuesday afternoon. I don't mind, I said. She didn't look up. That's what makes it worse. Outside, rain began to fall against the windows, soft, rhythmic, insistent. I thought she might say something else, maybe to take it back. But instead, she just kept painting, and I stayed where I was, neither of us willing to be the first to leave. The next day, the sky finally cleared. I saw Clara through the cafe window before I pushed the door open, her coat draped over the chair beside her, steam curling from a mug she hadn't touched. She was staring out at the street like she'd been waiting for something, or maybe just thinking too hard. I ordered coffee I didn't need and sat down across from her. Didn't expect to see you here, I said. She smiled, polite but a little weary. You always say that when you mean you followed me. I froze halfway through a laugh. Maybe. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe was half empty, muffled jazz, soft clinking of cups. A couple of kids from the art class passed by the window, waving before running off. Clara's hand rested near her cup, fingers tracing the rim as if she were sketching invisible lines. I forget people notice me outside that place, she said. You make it hard not to. I blurted, then wished I hadn't. Her eyebrows lifted. That's a dangerous thing to say. It's true, though. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but couldn't find a reason. The faintest color rose to her cheeks. You don't have to flatter me, Noah. I'm not. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was crowded with everything I hadn't learned to hide yet. She looked down, pretending to adjust her scarf, but her hand trembled slightly. I keep thinking about what you said, I added, about not staying too long. You remember that? I haven't stopped. Her breath caught, barely audible over the music. Then she laughed, quiet, shaky, genuine. You sound older than you are. Maybe you make me feel that way. The words slipped out before I could measure them. She stopped laughing, eyes soft but cautious, like she'd reached the edge of something she didn't know how to cross. Then came the interruption, the barista calling her name, voice cutting through the static between us. Clara blinked, relief and regret flashing across her face. That's mine. She stood too quickly, almost knocking over her cup. I reached out on instinct, steadying it. My fingers brushed hers, barely, but it was enough to freeze us both. The touch was brief, no longer than a breath, but it left a current in the air that neither of us acknowledged. Thanks, she murmured, withdrawing her hand. I nodded, pretending to check my phone, though the screen was blank. When she came back with her drink, she didn't sit right away. She hesitated by the chair, eyes darting to the window, the door, anywhere but me. This is complicated, she said finally. I know, and you're not helping. I know that too. She sighed, half a laugh, half surrender. Then what are we doing? I opened my mouth, but before I could answer, her phone buzzed across the table, an incoming call lighting up the screen with a name I recognized, her ex-husband. She silenced it after the first ring, placed the phone face down, and said quietly, You should probably go. I wanted to ask why, or stay until she told me not to, but all I said was, See you at the center. She nodded without looking at me. Outside, the afternoon light was harsh and colorless. I stood on the sidewalk, watching her through the glass as she finally took a sip of her coffee, staring at the door I'd just walked through. For a second, I thought she might follow. She didn't. But the way she kept her hand on the untouched chair beside her made it impossible to believe she'd already let me go. 3 days passed before I saw her again. The rain had returned, light but constant, leaving the streets slick and shining under the street lamps. I was closing up the community center when I heard her voice behind me. You missed class, she said. I turned. Clara stood in the doorway, hair damp from the walk, coat draped over one arm. Her smile was small, uncertain. I figured you didn't need me fixing shelves forever, I said. She stepped inside, letting the door fall shut. Maybe I got used to you being around. The words hung there, half a confession, half a mistake. She looked away first, fiddling with the strap of her bag. I was just making coffee, I said, nodding toward the office kitchenette. You want one? She hesitated, then followed. The smell of old beans filled the tiny room as the machine sputtered. We waited in silence, listening to the sound of it drip. When I handed her the cup, our fingers touched. Neither of us moved. She finally whispered, "This is ridiculous." I know, and yet we keep finding reasons. I smiled barely. Or excuses. Clara laughed under her breath, then took a sip that was clearly too hot. She winced, set the cup down, pressed her thumb against her lip. I almost asked if she was okay, but the quiet between us said more than words could. Do you ever wish timing was different? I asked. She looked up, surprised. Every day. The answer came too quickly. She caught herself, straightened her shoulders. I mean, when I was younger. Before everything got complicated. Her attempt at distance only made it feel closer. I leaned against the counter, watching the steam curl from her cup. You said once we leave things behind thinking they'll wait for us. She met my eyes. You remembered that. Some things stick. A faint smile tugged at her mouth, but she didn't hold it long. Noah, you shouldn't. I know. Because this isn't fair. It's not, I said quietly. We both knew she wasn't talking about fairness. She was talking about risk, about what people would see, about what she might lose if she reached across the distance still between us. The fluorescent light flickered overhead. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, then froze mid-motion, realizing my gaze had followed the gesture. You're staring, she said, voice almost playful but breaking near the end. I'm sorry. Don't be. The words slipped out of her so softly I wasn't sure she meant for me to hear. Her phone buzzed on the counter again, the same name lighting the screen. She silenced it without looking, leaving her hand resting beside the device. We stood there, 2 cups cooling, one unanswered call between us. Finally, she spoke. If I asked you to stop coming around, would you? I didn't answer right away. Her eyes flickered to mine, searching, hoping maybe I'd make the choice for her. I don't know, I said. That earned the faintest laugh, sad, resigned. She looked down, tracing the rim of her cup with her fingertip, slow circles like she was erasing something invisible. When she lifted her gaze again, it was steady. Then we're both in trouble. Neither of us moved. The air felt too thick for breathing. Somewhere down the hall, a door slammed, breaking the moment. She stepped back, gathering her coat, but her eyes stayed locked on mine. Good night, Noah, she said. She didn't leave right away, though. Her hand lingered on the doorknob. Waiting, for what? I wasn't sure. Maybe for me to say something that would make it easier. But I didn't. And when she finally walked out, the smell of her coffee and rain stayed behind, sharp and impossible to ignore. Saturday afternoon, the center was busier than usual. A small art exhibition filled the halls. Clara's students had pinned their work to the corkboards, paper still curling at the corners. I was helping hang the last canvas when I heard her laugh. Not the quiet one she used with me, but the bright, public kind she used when people were watching. I turned and froze. Standing beside her was a man about her age, leaning too comfortably close, a familiar ease in the way he handed her a coffee cup. He looked like the name I'd seen light up her phone. Clara noticed me a moment later. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, guilt, then composure. Noah, she said, this is Daniel. Daniel offered a hand. You're the one helping around here, right? Clara's told me you've been a big help. I shook his hand, nodding, but the warmth in his grip didn't reach his eyes. Yeah, just maintenance stuff. Good to finally meet you, he said. She mentioned you're still figuring things out. It must be nice to have time to wander. The comment stung more than it should have. I forced a polite smile. Guess so. Clara stepped in, voice a little too careful. Daniel's just visiting. He wanted to see the students' work. Daniel looked around. She's got talent. Always did. It's hard to stay away. He meant it as a compliment, but the words carried something heavier. A claim, maybe, or a reminder. I excused myself to fix a loose frame, mostly to avoid standing there. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the wire. I could feel Clara's eyes on me across the room, though she was trying not to make it obvious. When the crowd thinned out later, she found me by the supply closet. You didn't have to disappear, she said quietly. I wasn't going to interrupt. You weren't interrupting. It seemed like I was. Her sigh was half frustration, half apology. Daniel and I, we're trying to figure things out again. He thinks maybe we could. She stopped, shook her head. I shouldn't be telling you this. It's fine, I said. But it wasn't. She studied me for a long moment. You look angry. I'm not, I said, though my voice betrayed me. Just surprised. By what? That you didn't tell me. Clara blinked. I didn't know I owed you that. The words hit harder than they should have. Right? I said, stepping back. You don't. She rubbed her temple, closing her eyes for a moment. I didn't mean it like that. I know, I said, softer now. I thought I understood what this was. Her voice trembled when she answered. So did I. The sound of rain began again. Outside, faint, tapping against the high windows. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, you should go before this gets harder. But when I turned to leave, she reached out, fingers brushing my sleeve, the lightest touch, enough to stop me. Noah, she said, please don't think I don't. A voice called her name from down the hall. Daniel. Her hand dropped. She forced a small, practiced smile. Go on, before someone gets the wrong idea. I nodded, though it was already too late for that. When I walked past Daniel in the doorway, he gave me a polite nod, one that felt like victory. Outside, I stood under the awning, rain soaking my sleeves, trying to decide which part hurt more, that I'd misread her, or that I hadn't. A week passed without a word between us. The exhibition came down, the hallways emptied, and the center felt hollow again. I told myself she was busy, that she didn't owe me an explanation. Still, every time the front door opened, I looked up. It was nearly closing when she finally came in. Noah, she said, breathless from the rain. Can we talk? I nodded, though my pulse jumped. We sat on the edge of a work table surrounded by half-cleaned paint jars. The fluorescent light above us buzzed, faint and uneven. I didn't plan that day right, she began. Daniel showed up, it threw me. He wanted to see what I've built here. I let him. I stayed quiet. She folded her arms, rubbing her palms as if warming them. You looked at me like I'd lied. Did you? I asked, more gently than I felt. She exhaled. Maybe I lied by omission. I didn't want to ruin what little peace we had. Her voice broke slightly on us. You didn't ruin it, I said. We just reached the edge of something neither of us could cross. She gave a tired smile. You always put things neatly, only when they hurt. For the first time that night, she laughed, a real, soft laugh that faded into quiet. You remind me of myself at your age, she said, wanting everything to mean something, doesn't it? Sometimes meaning is the problem. She looked at me then, eyes wet from the reflection of the light. You showed me I could still feel seen. I forgot what that was like. The admission hit harder than I expected. That's all I wanted. I know. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on the table between us. Not touching, just near. You should take what you learned here and use it somewhere else. With someone who isn't afraid of being seen back. The words were both kindness and farewell. I nodded, throat tight. You'll finish that gray painting? Her smile returned, faint but certain. Maybe, but I'll leave the red streak. You said it looked honest. I stood, unsure what to do with my hands. She stood too, close enough that I could smell rain on her coat. I'll still drop by, I said, just to help. You don't have to, she whispered. I know. Silence stretched again, but this time it didn't ache. It simply existed, the space between two people who'd finally said enough. As I turned to leave, she called out, Noah? I looked back. Thank you, she said, for reminding me I'm still someone worth looking at, even when no one should. I smiled, unable to answer. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining under the streetlights. I walked home through the quiet, aware that something had ended, but also that something in both of us had started again, separately. Spring came late that year. The air still held the bite of winter, but the mornings grew brighter, softer. I hadn't been back to the community center in months. Sometimes I passed it on my way to work, the paint flaking on the side door, the same wind chimes still hanging above the window. Every time, I slowed down without meaning to, but I never went in. When I finally did, it was by accident. I'd stopped for coffee nearby, And through the glass, I saw the new flyers pinned on the notice board. Summer art workshop with Clara Langford. The same handwriting. The same red marker she always used for the dates. I stood there for a while, watching people go in and out. Then I stepped inside. She was there, of course, kneeling beside a table of children, showing them how to mix blue and gray to get the right shade of sea. She looked different, lighter somehow, like the heaviness had finally shifted. Her laughter carried across the room, not cautious this time. When she noticed me by the door, her hands stilled. Then she smiled. Not surprised, not flustered, just warm. Familiar. Noah, she said, standing. It's been a while. Yeah, I said. I was nearby. She wiped her palms on a cloth, nodded toward the paintings on the wall. They're getting better every week. They have a good teacher. That made her laugh quietly. Are you still fixing things that don't need fixing? Trying to, I said. It's a habit. For a long moment, there was nothing else to say. But this silence was different. No longer tense, no longer waiting. Just simple, honest, quiet. I handed her a small envelope. For the class fund. Brushes, or whatever you need. She took it gently, fingers brushing mine in the briefest, easiest touch we'd ever shared. Thank you, she said. Really? I should go, I told her. Take care, Noah. You too. I walked out before the kids started their next lesson. Outside, the air smelled faintly of rain. I stood by the curb for a long time, listening to their laughter through the open windows, small, bright, and alive. It hit me then. Not everything had to end in confession or collapse. Some things could just become quieter. Something you carry instead of chase. I hadn't fallen in love with her, not exactly. I'd fallen into the space where two lives almost met, where admiration, loneliness, and timing tangled into something that could never quite exist, but still mattered. And that, somehow, felt enough. Later, as I walked home, I passed a new mural on the corner wall, gray with a single red streak cutting through the middle. I stopped, smiled, and kept walking. Clapperboard reflection prompt for viewers. Did this story stay with you, even after the silence? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? The ones that almost happened, or the ones that finally did?